The checkout line. The space station market was always loud, voices mixing like waves in a storm. Bright lights flickered from neon signs, and the smell of strange alien food floated in the air. It was a place where traders from dozens of species came to sell, to buy, and to survive. In the middle of all this noise stood a woman, her skin pale silver, her eyes dark and tired. She carried a small bundle in her arms, a child with thin cheeks and wide eyes. The mother's clothes were worn, her steps slow, but her arms held tight to the little one. The child looked around with hunger in their gaze, staring at the fresh bread on the counter. The mother placed a few items on the conveyor of the checkout line: bread, milk, and some dried fruit. It was not much, but for her and the child, it was everything. The cashier scanned each item, the numbers glowing on the small screen. The mother reached into her small bag and pulled out her credit chips. Her hands shook as she counted them again and again. The screen beeped. The total was more than she had. The mother's heart sank. She whispered something in her own language, a soft sound that carried fear and shame. The cashier, a human with dark hair and tired but kind eyes, looked at her silently. He noticed the way her shoulders shook as if the weight of the galaxy pressed down on them. Behind her, the line grew longer. A tall reptilian alien hissed in irritation. Another muttered angrily. No one wanted to wait for a poor woman to fumble with coins and credits. The mother lowered her head. She picked up the bread. Her child's eyes locked onto it desperately and placed it back on the counter. She picked up the milk, hesitated, and then set it aside too. Her voice trembled. I cannot afford this," she said in broken standard. Her child clutched at her sleeve, eyes watering. The little one did not understand money but understood hunger. The sound of the child's soft whimper was enough to twist hearts. If anyone cared to listen, but most in the line only grew angrier. The cashier paused. His fingers tapped on the screen. His eyes studied the woman, the child, and then the returned food. He saw the way the boy's lips trembled. He saw the way the mother's hands shook as though returning the food hurt more than starving. The human cashier had seen many things on the station: smugglers, thieves, drunks, and liars. But this was different. This was not a crime. This was desperation. And in that moment, he made a decision that would change everything. "Wait," he said firmly. The woman froze, her silver eyes wide with confusion. The cashier scanned the bread and milk again. His hand slipped into his own pocket. He pulled out a small card and pressed it against the reader. A soft beep confirmed the payment. The mother gasped. No, please, I cannot," she whispered, trying to push the food back. But the cashier pushed it toward her instead. His eyes locked on hers, calm but unyielding. "Take it," he said. His voice was steady, not cruel, not pitying, but certain. "Your child needs it." The market around them grew quiet. The reptilian alien stopped hissing. The others stared in surprise. In this place, kindness was rare, especially between species. The mother's lips trembled. She pulled the bread and milk close to her chest. Her child reached out, hugging the loaf as if it was treasure. Tears welled in her eyes. "Why?" she whispered. Her voice was broken, fragile, as if she had forgotten what kindness felt like. The cashier only shook his head. "Because it's the right thing," he said simply. For a moment, the market did not feel like the usual harsh, cold place. For a moment, there was silence. Only the sound of the child biting into the bread broke it. A soft, grateful sound, small but powerful. But in the shadows of the market, not all eyes were kind. Whispers began. Aliens murmured to each other. Some scoffed, calling humans strange, foolish creatures. Others watched with curiosity, wondering why anyone would pay for another's survival. The mother clutched her child, still staring at the cashier. She wanted to speak, to thank him properly, but her throat was tight with emotion. The cashier gave her a small nod, urging her forward. The line moved again. The noise of the market returned, but for the mother and her child, something had shifted, and for the human cashier, he did not yet know it. But this small act of kindness would ripple far beyond the checkout line. The mother stood frozen, her arms wrapped tightly around the food as if it were a shield. Her child's small hands gripped the bread, tearing tiny pieces with quiet eagerness. The human cashier, whose name tag read Evan, watched them for a moment. His heart was heavy, but there was also a quiet strength in his chest. He knew what he had done was simple, just paying for food. But in a place like this, it was almost dangerous. The reptilian alien behind them finally hissed again, but softer this time. Its forked tongue flickered, and then it looked away, muttering in its own language. The others in line did not speak, but their eyes followed. The mother, as she slowly stepped aside, clutching her child close. Her silver skin shimmered faintly in the harsh light, but there was no pride left in her face. Only exhaustion mixed with disbelief. Evan scanned the next customer's items, but his mind lingered on the woman. He knew poverty when he saw it. Back on Earth, he had seen people dig through garbage bins for food. He had seen single mothers cry at night when their children asked for meals they could not provide. And he had promised himself long ago, if he could help even in a small way, he would never turn away. But this was not Earth. This was a crowded alien station where kindness was not a common currency. Here, survival often meant looking out for yourself and no one else. To pay for someone else's food was considered weakness. As the line cleared, Evan caught sight of the mother again. She had stopped a few steps away, staring down at the bread, as though it was not real. Her child tugged at her arm, trying to smile through the crumbs stuck on their cheeks. Evan felt a warmth in his chest at the sight, but also a strange unease. He leaned slightly over the counter and called out, "Ma'am?" His voice was calm, but it carried. The mother's silver eyes met his again, wide and uncertain. He gestured gently. "Sit for a moment over there by the bench." The woman hesitated, her body tensing. On this station, when someone told her to wait, it often meant trouble, guards, or questions. But the tone in the human's voice was different, steady, kind but firm. After a pause, she nodded and slowly moved to the bench with her child. Evan finished serving the last of the line. His hands worked automatically, but his mind was elsewhere. He could feel curious stares following him. He could hear faint whispers of strange human or soft-hearted fool, yet none of it mattered. Finally, when his shift's lull arrived, he walked out from behind the counter, wiping his hands on his apron. He approached the bench where the woman sat. She stiffened as he neared, clutching the child close. Her eyes darted around as if expecting someone to accuse her of theft. Evan stopped a safe distance away, lowering his voice. "I don't want anything from you," he said gently. "I only wanted to help." The woman blinked, confusion flickering across her face. She whispered slowly in broken standard, Why you do this? We are not same people." Evan gave a faint smile. "Because hunger doesn't care who you are," he replied, "and because your child deserves to eat." The child looked up at him, crumbs still stuck on their small lips. Then, to Evan's surprise, the child murmured something in their alien tongue. The words were soft but carried weight. The mother's eyes widened, almost as if embarrassed. She quickly hushed the child. Evan tilted his head, curious. "What did he say?" The mother's voice trembled. "He said, 'Thank you, Father.'" The word hit Evan like a sudden shock. For a moment, the busy market seemed distant. He had no children of his own, never married. His life had been work, travel, and surviving, paycheck to paycheck across different worlds. Yet here was a child, calling him father with pure, innocent gratitude. Evan knelt down slightly, his eyes meeting the child's. He smiled softly. "I'm not your father," he said kindly, "but I'll take your thanks." The mother lowered her gaze, her voice almost breaking. "We have no one," she admitted. "We hide. Always." Her words stirred something inside Evan. He knew there was more to her story, the way she looked around nervously, the way she kept her child close. It was not just poverty, it was fear. Before he could ask more, a shadow loomed over them. A group of station guards walked by, their armored boots striking the floor with a heavy rhythm. Their reptilian faces showed no warmth. Their eyes swept over the crowd and then paused, lingering on the silver-skinned. "Woman?" The mother froze, her breath catching. Evan noticed her grip on the child tighten, her body almost folded into itself. He understood at once. She was hiding from someone, or something. One guard tilted his head, whispering to the other. Their eyes stayed fixed on the mother. Suspicion, interest, and maybe something worse burned in their gaze. Evan straightened, his jaw tightening. He felt his pulse quicken. He didn't know who she was or why the guards cared, but he knew one thing. His small choice to help her had drawn attention, and that attention could be dangerous. He glanced at the mother, her eyes wide with fear. Then he looked back at the guards, already stepping closer. The checkout line had seemed like a simple act of kindness. But now, Evan realized, it was the beginning of something much larger. The market was never truly quiet, but sometimes silence came in strange ways. When the guards stopped, when their eyes locked on the silver-skinned woman, the air seemed to change. It was not soundless, yet every voice felt muted, as if waiting for something to break. Evan stood tall beside the bench, his chest tight. The woman kept her head down, clutching her child so close it seemed she wanted to fold the child into her very skin. The child whimpered softly, sensing danger though not understanding it. The guards did not approach right away. Instead, they muttered to each other, their forked tongues flickering. Their armor gleamed under the market lights, and their hands rested lazily near their shock batons. It was a warning, the kind predators gave before the strike. Whispers began in the crowd. A small insectoid vendor buzzed to another. "Isn't she one of them?" The word "them" spread like fire, whispered from one mouth to another, from one species to the next. Evan caught pieces of it. Runaway. Dangerous. Not welcome here. The crowd did not look at her with pity, but with fear and suspicion. Some even stepped back as though her presence alone was a crime. The mother heard it too. Her shoulders trembled. She whispered in her own tongue. Words Evan could not understand, but felt like a prayer. The child hid his face in her chest. Evan clenched his fists. He had not known what she was hiding, but now it was clear. This was more than poverty. This woman and her child were fugitives, not because they had stolen or killed, but because of what they were born as. One of the guards finally stepped forward, his boot striking the metal floor. His eyes narrowed at the woman. "You," he barked in standard. "Stand up." The woman froze. The crowd leaned closer, holding its breath. Evan felt his heart race. Every instinct told him to stay out of. Humans did not interfere with station law, but the memory of the child calling him father pressed against his chest, and the memory of hunger in their eyes reminded him why he had acted in the first place. Before the woman could rise, Evan stepped between her and the guard. His voice came out steady, though his insides twisted. "She's done nothing wrong." The guard blinked, surprise flashing in his reptilian gaze. Then his expression twisted into a sneer. "Move aside, human," he hissed. "This does not concern you." The whispers in the market grew louder. Some aliens gasped. Others smirked. Humans rarely stood up against station guards. This was foolish, reckless, but also strange. Evan shook his head, his voice firm. "It concerns me when you target a mother and her child for no reason." The guard's forked tongue flickered again, tasting the air. He leaned closer, his breath smelling of iron. "You know who she is?" Evan said nothing. He didn't need to. His silence was enough. The guard chuckled darkly. "Then you are even more of a fool than I thought." Behind them, the whispers turned into low conversations. The insectoid vendor buzzed again. "Did you hear? A human protecting one of them." A tall, furred alien grunted. "Humans are strange. They help the weak even when it kills them." The guards exchanged glances. One shook his head. "We'll report this," he muttered. "If she is truly what I think, higher command will want to know." They did not drag her away. Not yet. Instead, they turned sharply and marched off, their boots striking the floor with heavy finality. The woman exhaled sharply, her whole body trembling with relief and fear at the same time. Her silver eyes looked at Evan, wide and unsteady. "Why?" she whispered. "You will be marked now." "They saw you defend me." Evan lowered his voice. "Then let them mark me," he said. "I won't stand by and watch." The woman stared at him, her lips parting as if to speak, but no words came. Her child tugged at her sleeve, whispering, again in their alien tongue Evan could not understand, but he saw the way the mother's eyes softened. Her child was smiling, because in their small heart, they thought the danger was gone, but Evan knew better. Danger did not leave so easily. As the guards disappeared, the market slowly returned to life, yet the whispers did not fade. Instead, they spread wider. Traders muttered about the human cashier who paid for a stranger's food, about the mother whose skin marked her as other, about the child who dared to call a human father. Some of those whispers carried kindness, admiration even. A few small smiles appeared in the crowd, hidden but real. But most whispers carried warning, suspicion, or even anger. This was not the end. It was the beginning. Evan looked at the woman. "You should not stay here long," he said quietly. The woman nodded slowly, her eyes glistening. "We move. Always," she whispered. "But now, maybe harder." Evan frowned. His chest tightened again. He had thought his kindness was small, just a choice at the checkout line, but already it was spreading like wildfire. It was painting targets not just on her back, but on his as well. As he walked back toward his counter, he could feel eyes on him from every corner, some filled with respect, others with cold judgment. The market was alive with whispers, and those whispers would not stay. In the market alone, the story of the human cashier and the silver-skinned mother had just begun to travel, and no one could guess where it would end. The silver-skinned mother sat quietly on the bench, her arms wrapped tight around her child. The food Evan had paid for was pressed against her lap as though it might be stolen if she let it go. Her breathing was uneven, but her eyes kept darting back to Evan, watching him return to his counter. She did not understand him. Not truly. In her world, no one helped without wanting something back. The child, however, saw things differently. The child's wide dark eyes followed Evan like he was some kind of giant star. The small hand still clutched the bread, tiny crumbs stuck to his fingers. He looked up at his mother and whispered something in their alien tongue. His voice was soft, but Evan noticed the mother flinch. She looked down at the boy with wet eyes and shook her head. Still, the boy wriggled out of her arms. He was small, thin, his steps wobbly but determined. He walked across the busy floor toward the counter where Evan was stacking packages. Some aliens in line frowned, some chuckled, but the boy ignored them. He stopped right in front of Evan and tugged on the human's apron. Evan looked down, surprised. "Hey, little one," he said softly. His voice was careful, as though speaking too loud might break the child. The boy said something in his alien tongue, his voice high and clear. The market around them grew quiet. Again, several aliens nearby turned their heads. They recognized the words, even if Evan did not. The mother rushed forward, panic flashing in her eyes. She grabbed her child's arm, pulling him back. "No," she whispered sharply, but it was too late. Evan knelt down so he could meet the boy's eyes. "I don't understand," he said gently. "Can you say it again?" The boy tilted his head. He tried again, but this time he struggled to form the words in standard. His little mouth twisted, his voice stumbling. "Thank you. Fa. There." The word father carried through the air like a spark. Some aliens gasped, some muttered under their breath. A few even laughed bitterly. The mother looked as though she might collapse. She pulled the child into her arms, whispering, "Quiet, please, not here." Her face burned with shame and fear, but the child did not look afraid. His eyes were bright, shining with something Evan had not seen on this station in a long time. Trust. Evan felt the word sink into him. His chest ached, he smiled faintly. resting a hand on the counter for balance. "I'm not your father," he said softly, "but I'll take your thanks." The boy giggled, a sound so light it cut through the heavy tension of the market. It was a sound of innocence, untouched by the cruelty around him. The sound made a few bystanders shift uncomfortably as though they had forgotten what laughter from a child even felt like. Evan glanced at the mother. Her eyes glistened with unshed tears. She whispered in broken standard, He has never said that to anyone before." She shook her head, clutching the boy tighter. "You do not understand. His kind. My kind. We do not trust outsiders." Evan gave a small nod. "Then maybe he's the first to change that," he said, but the whispers in the market had already begun again, louder now, sharper. "Father?" one alien muttered. "The child thinks a human is his father." Another spat. "Disgraceful." Others leaned closer, eager for gossip. The mother trembled. "We should go," she whispered urgently to Evan, her silver eyes wide with fear. "This will spread." Evan looked around. He could see it too. The curious stares, the disgust, the smirks. His simple act of kindness had turned into a story, and now the boy's innocent word had given it a new shape. In a place where species barely tolerated each other, a single child calling a human father was like throwing fuel onto a flame. Still, Evan could not regret it. He knelt down once more, meeting the boy's eyes. "Take care of your mother," he whispered. "Be strong for her." The boy nodded eagerly, as though he had just been given the most important mission in the universe. His small hands squeezed the bread tighter. He looked at Evan with a smile so bright, it almost seemed out of place in the gray, crowded market. The mother bowed her head, her voice quiet. "I cannot repay you," she said, "but no, I will not forget this." Evan stood, his jaw tightening. "I didn't do it for payment," he replied. His eyes flicked toward the guards who had disappeared earlier. "I did it because it was right." The mother stared at him, her lips parting as though to argue, but then she closed them again. Perhaps for the first time in a long while, she let herself believe in someone else's kindness, but the peace was short-lived. From the far end of the market, heavy footsteps echoed again. The guards were returning, not alone this time. Behind them walked a tall officer, his armor gleaming darker, his face set with authority. He scanned the crowd with cold, sharp eyes. The whispers stopped at once. Silence fell like a curtain. The mother's grip on her child tightened until the boy whimpered. Evan's stomach twisted, he knew. This was not over. And as the officer's eyes found the silver-skinned woman and her child, Evan realized his choice at the checkout line had placed them all in the center of a storm that was just beginning. The officer's shadow stretched long across the market floor. His armor was heavier than the guards who walked before him, and his presence carried weight like a storm about to break. Conversations stopped, stalls fell quiet. Even the clinking of credits seemed to fade. All eyes turned toward him, and then toward the woman and her child. Evan felt his pulse quicken. He stood close to the silver-skinned woman, who clutched her child so tightly the boy whimpered. Her eyes were wide with terror. She whispered something in her tongue, a trembling chant. Evan recognized it now. He had heard it before. It was the same prayer she had murmured when the guards first looked at her. The officer stopped a few feet away. His voice was cold, deep, and steady. "You should not be here," he said, not to Evan but to the mother. "Your kind was banned from this station years ago." Gasps rippled through the crowd. Some aliens stepped back, others leaned closer. Evan looked sharply at the woman, confusion and shock filling his mind. He had known she was hiding something, but he had not expected this. The mother's lips trembled. "Please," she whispered in broken standard. "We only need food. We will leave." The officer's eyes narrowed. His gaze flicked, briefly to the child, then back to her. "You dare bring him here," he said harshly. "Do you not understand what he is?" The whispers grew louder. Evan heard fragments. Dangerous, cursed, unstable. The boy pressed his face into his mother's shoulder, not understanding the words. but feeling the weight behind them. Evan stepped forward. "She's done nothing wrong," he said firmly. His voice shook, but he forced it steady. "She bought food, that's all." The officer's gaze snapped to Evan, studying him as though he were a strange insect. "You paid for her food, human," he said. "You stood in front of my guards for her. Do you know who she is? What she carries?" Evan swallowed hard, his hands clenched into fists at his sides. "I don't care who she is," he said. "I only saw a mother trying to feed her child." The officer's lip curled into something between a sneer and a smirk. "Then you are a greater fool than I thought," he said. He turned back to the woman. "You should have stayed hidden. You should have stayed in the shadows where your kind belongs." The mother shook her head violently, tears slipping down her cheeks. "No more shadows," she whispered. "I want my son to live." Her words drew silence. Even the officer paused for a moment. Then his eyes hardened. "Do you want them to know?" he asked her. His voice was sharp like a knife cutting through the crowd. The mother trembled. Her hands shook. She looked at Evan, her silver eyes glistening with fear, and for the first time she spoke clearly, without breaking her standard. "We are from the Velari," she said. The name hit the air like thunder. Whispers exploded into gasps. Some aliens hissed, others recoiled. The insectoid vendor nearly dropped his wares. A tall reptilian cursed under his breath. Evan blinked. "Confused, Velari?" he repeated. The word meant nothing to him, but to everyone else it clearly did. The crowd's reaction was enough. The officer's voice was sharp. "The Velari nearly burned this station to ash 20 years ago. They were conquerors, monsters. They unleashed firestorms on planets. They slaughtered without mercy." His eyes narrowed. "And now you bring a Velari child into my station?" Evan looked at the child, wide-eyed and trembling. He could not imagine this small, hungry boy as anything close to a monster. His chest burned with anger at the words. "She's not an enemy," Evan said loudly. "She's a mother, and that boy is just a child." The officer's gaze was like, "Ice the Velari do not change," he said coldly. "Blood remembers." The mother shook her head, clutching her boy tighter. "He is not them," she cried. "He is my son. He has hurt no one. He is innocent." The officer raised his hand, signaling to his guards. The crowd leaned back as the guards stepped forward. Their batons buzzed. With faint electricity, the child whimpered louder, the mother's body trembling like glass about to shatter. Evan's mind raced. His instincts screamed at him to stay out of it. This was not his fight, but another voice inside him, the same voice that made him pay for the food, shouted louder. He stepped forward again, his body between the guards and the mother. "You will have to go through me," he said. The officer's eyes narrowed dangerously. "You would risk your life for one of them?" he asked. His tone was almost amused, but his hand did not lower. Evan's jaw tightened. "I would risk it for anyone who just wants their child to eat," he said. The crowd buzzed again. Some aliens whispered in disbelief. Others watched with a strange spark of respect. Humans were new to the station, often ignored, often underestimated. But this one was drawing attention in a way no one expected. The officer studied Evan for a long moment. His eyes flicked to the child again, then back to the human. Finally, he lowered his hand slightly. "Foolish human," he muttered. "You do not know what storm you invite." He turned sharply, signaling his guards to fall back. The crowd exhaled, the tension breaking like a wave, but the officer's words lingered like smoke. The mother sank to her knees, clutching her child. Her shoulders shook as tears fell freely now. Evan crouched beside her, his hand resting gently on her shoulder. "It's all right," he whispered, though he knew it was not, because now he understood. This was no longer just about kindness at a checkout line. The mother carried a secret, and the boy carried a legacy that the galaxy would not forgive easily, and Evan had placed himself right in the center of it. The air in the market was thick with tension. Even after the officer and his guards had stepped back, the crowd still buzzed with fear and curiosity. The name of the Velari echoed through whispers bouncing from one mouth to another, as though the very sound of it could ignite old wounds. The mother sat on the floor, clutching her boy. Her silver skin glistened with sweat, her shoulders shaking. The child hid his face in her chest, small fingers gripping the fabric of her torn clothes. Evan crouched beside them, his body a barrier. His heart was pounding, but his voice came steady. "You're safe right now," he whispered. "I won't let them touch you." But even as he said it, he knew the words were fragile. Safety on this station was a coin tossed into the void, never guaranteed. The officer's cold eyes scanned the crowd. He had not forgotten, he was calculating. Evan could feel it. The guard stood at his side, waiting for his signal. Their batons hummed faintly, the air crackling with restrained power. Finally, the officer spoke, his voice carrying easily over the quiet market. "This station does not allow Velari," he said firmly. "You and your child are a danger. You must leave now." The mother's voice broke as she answered, "We have nowhere to go." Her words were desperate, her accent heavy. "We only want to live." The officer raised a hand again, and this time the guards moved forward. The crowd parted quickly, eager to watch but unwilling to stand close. Some sneered, some smirked, others looked away, unwilling to see what might happen. Evan rose to his feet. He stepped directly into the path of the guards, his eyes locked with theirs. "Enough," he said sharply. His voice cut across the tension like a blade. "She's not a threat. Neither is the boy. If you want them gone, you'll have to go through me first." The crowd gasped. Humans were not known for defiance here. They were traders, workers, cleaners, never challengers. But this one, this cashier, stood like a wall of stone in front of the officer's armed men. The officer narrowed his eyes, studying Evan. "Do you even know what you're protecting?" he asked coldly. "That boy is Velari. Do you understand what that means?" Evan's jaw tightened. "I understand he's a child," he said. "Hungry, innocent, just a boy. Whatever his people did before, he didn't do it." The officer's lips curled. "Naive," he spat. He gestured, and two guards stepped forward, raising their batons. The electric crackle filled the air. Some in the crowd cheered softly, as though they wanted to see blood. Others shook their heads, whispering that the human was signing his own death. Evan's fists clenched. He had no weapon, no armor, just his body and his will. Still, he planted his feet firmly. He would not move. The child peeked over his mother's shoulder, his small eyes wide and wet with tears. "Father," he whispered in his alien tongue. The word was soft, almost lost in the noise, but Evan heard it, and it gave him strength. The first guard stepped closer, baton raised. Evan braced himself, ready to take the hit. But before it could fall, the mother suddenly cried out. Her voice rang across the market, breaking through everything. "Stop!" she screamed. Her silver eyes burned with tears. "If you take him, you take me too." She pulled her child tighter, rising to her knees. Her body trembled, but her voice carried desperation strong enough to shake the air. The guard hesitated. His baton hovered. The officer's expression hardened. "You think your words matter here?" he asked coldly, but the crowd had changed. Something in the mother's cry had stirred them. A few aliens muttered angrily, not at her, but at the guards. "It's only a child," one insectoid hissed. "Enough," said another voice, low but firm. The officer looked around, his eyes narrowed. He could feel the shift. The people were watching, not cheering, not supporting his command. The human's defiance had lit a spark, and now the mother's cry had fanned it into flame. Still, he did not back down. He gestured again, and the guards tightened their grip. Evan stepped closer, his voice low but steady. "If you harm them, here everyone will remember. You'll turn a market into a battlefield." The officer's eyes flickered with calculation. He hated the truth in those words. He wanted to strike, to crush, but even he knew the danger of public spectacle. Finally, he lowered his hand slowly. "This is not over," he hissed. His voice dripped with venom. He pointed at the mother. "You and your child are marked. You cannot hide forever." His gaze shifted to Evan, sharp and cold. "And you, human, you have made enemies you cannot even name." With that, he turned sharply. Signaling his guards, they marched away, their boots pounding like drums of war. The crowd exhaled. A wave of noise rushed back as voices rose. Some whispered in awe of Evan, others muttered that he was doomed. But for now, the danger had passed. The mother sank back to the bench, her body shaking with exhaustion. Her child clung to her, still whispering, "Father," softly in his tongue. Evan crouched beside them, his hands trembling slightly, but his eyes steady. "You're safe for now," he said gently, though he knew it was only half true because deep inside Evan understood. The officer would not stop. The guards would return, and when they did, it would not just be whispers or warnings, it would be war between duty and compassion, and Evan had already chosen his side. The market did not forget what it had seen. Even after the officer and his guards vanished into the steel corridors of the station, the whispers remained. They moved like invisible threads, weaving from one stall to another, from one voice to the next. The human cashier, the silver-skinned mother, and the boy who had called him father. Their story was already spreading. Some called Evan a fool, some called him brave. Others simply shook their heads and muttered that trouble was sure to follow him, but for the mother and her child, the moment felt like a miracle. For the first time in months, no one had dragged them away. For the first time, someone had stood in front of them instead of turning away. The mother looked at Evan with tired eyes, but behind the exhaustion was something else. Something she had not felt in years. A fragile seed of hope, she whispered softly. Why do you risk everything for us?" Evan sat beside her on the bench. His apron was still dusty from work, his hands rough from lifting boxes. He looked nothing like a soldier, nothing like a hero, but when he spoke, his words carried weight. "Because no one should face the galaxy alone," he said. "Not a mother, not a child." The boy peeked up at him, his small eyes wide and shining. He held out the last piece of bread toward Evan, his hand trembling but determined. Evan blinked, surprised. "For me?" he asked. The boy nodded, smiling shyly. Evan accepted the bread, breaking it gently. He did not eat it. Instead, he handed half back to the boy. "We share," he said with a smile. The boy's laughter rang out, a sound pure and bright. It drew curious glances from the market. Some frowned, but others softened, remembering for a moment the sound of innocence. The mother lowered her head, whispering, "He has never trusted anyone before." Her voice trembled. "But he trusts you." Evan's chest ached at the words. He reached out and gently touched the boy's shoulder. "Then I'll do my best not to let him down," he said quietly. But danger still lingered like a shadow. They all knew it. The officer's warning was not an empty threat. The Velari name carried fear wherever it was spoken, and now Evan's name was tied to it. That night, as the market dimmed and stalls closed, Evan walked them through the quieter corridors of the station. His steps were steady, but his eyes scanned every corner, expecting guards, expecting trouble. The mother carried her child, and the child carried the last of the food, still nibbling happily. When they reached a small maintenance hall, Evan stopped. "You can rest here for tonight," he said. "It's not much, but no one comes down this way." The mother hesitated, her eyes flickering with mistrust. But then she saw the way Evan stood guard, the way he looked down each passage before letting her inside. Slowly, she nodded. "Thank you," she whispered. Evan leaned against the wall outside the small chamber. He did not sleep. His mind replayed the day over and over. The fear in the mother's eyes, the boy's soft father, the officer's warning. He knew he could have walked away. He could have pretended not to see. But instead, he had chosen. And that choice had changed everything. By morning, the whispers had grown louder. They traveled, beyond the market, into the docking bays, the cantinas, the living quarters. The story of the human cashier spread like fire, and with it spread a question. Were humans foolish, or were they something else entirely? Some said humans were weak, ruled by soft hearts. Others whispered that maybe this softness was their strength. When Evan returned to his post, he noticed something strange. A small insectoid left a piece of fruit on his counter and walked away. Silently, a tall, furred alien gave him a slow nod. Even the reptilian who once hissed at delays did not spit this time. Instead, he muttered, "Braver than I thought," before leaving his credits. Not everyone approved, of course. Some glared, some spat when he passed, and yet the balance had shifted. Evan's small act had cracked something open in the hearts of others. Later that day, the mother returned with her boy. She bowed her head low. "We will leave soon," she said. "It is safer." Her voice trembled, but there was strength in it too. "But before we go, my son wishes to say something." The boy stepped forward, his small hands clenched. He looked up at Evan, his voice shaky but brave. In broken standard, he said, "When I grow, I be strong like you." Evan's throat tightened. He placed a hand gently on the boy's shoulder. "Then promise me something," he said softly. "Be strong, but also be kind." The boy nodded quickly. His smile was wide and pure. The mother's eyes filled with tears. She bowed again, whispering, "We will not forget you." As they walked away, Evan stood silently at his counter, watching them disappear into the crowd. He did not know if he would ever see them again, but he knew this. The galaxy was vast, cruel, and cold. Yet sometimes one act of kindness could light a flame bright enough to guide others, and maybe, just maybe, that was how new beginnings were born.